Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Beef Season 1, Episode 7. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, first and foremost, we are picking up 8 months later. I wasn't expecting that time skip, but let's start off with Danny's side of things. Obviously, everything seems to be good. He's kind of in charge of Prey's team. Things haven't been going down Edwin's way. I mean, I guess after the basketball game, he had to officially step down because of the way he flipped out like that. But yeah, he's, and he's watching Danny kind of enjoy the spotlight. It seems like everything's good in Danny's life. The construction business seems to be doing better, but we know, that's the whole loan scam that him and Isaac had set up. Also, he's gotten closer to Esther, which is extra jacked up because Isaac was trying to get close to Esther, so that's kind of effed up. But obviously, he's still pining over his ex a little bit because Paul made some remarks about Edwin and his wife aren't really in a good place, and you could tell that's really pitting Danny because I think for him, she represents a point in time where everything was good, maybe before everything became stressful and what it was. So it's that thing in life where you kind of hit, and that's the kind of antithesis of the show too, is that midlife crisis thing. And she represents a simpler time when things were better. I think Paul kind of represents that too, being the younger brother, where it's you kind of don't have the care in the world, all the weight of everything feels like it's shouldered on Danny, but we don't know if that's just the expectation he feels put upon him, or is he the one that puts it upon him? Is it unrealistic that he's thinking all this is being pushed on me, but he takes it on unwillingly, kind of burdening himself, but making it seem like everyone else burdens him. There's just kind of a lot in that department. So obviously, and because he also comes from that hustle mentality, and he even talks about it this episode where he's always work. That's how for him, it's he's always had that mentality through life. And for him, he has that moment of it could all go away, which a lot of people have that mentality. It's you have to grind, especially you came from kind of nothing and you got to work your way up. You're always afraid that this could all go away. You can't really even relax and enjoy it. It's been 8 months, and even then, I don't think Danny's he seems like he's living life, he's enjoying it, everything's Gucci, everything's culture, but it's no, it's all nothing. He didn't get the fulfillment he thought he was going to get. He finally got his parents' house built. He's showing everything off, but you still hear his dad kind of complaining and a little bit from his mom. But he for one was kind of thinking you'd be a little more excited, but it's, I think that stereotypical, Asian parent thing of oh, nothing you do was ever good enough type of thing. Oh, you did something great, sure, but it could have been better. You could have done better. We don't need a rice cooker, especially when playing Kelly Clarkson. We don't need that. But he also thought he'd get some fulfillment from it. That's where you get into that thing of, did his parents really put that pressure on him, or did he put this all on himself because he used them as an excuse to kind of fill some void in himself, and he thought it'd make him feel better, And he's also talking to Edwin, which Edwin's yo, I want to get cut into whatever you're doing. He's construction. He's no, I don't know how to do construction stuff. But whatever else you got planned, I'm a part of that. He's oh, he's I don't know the definition, but construction's construction. He's yeah, construction, whatever. I'm oh, Edwin knows you got some shady business up. And even I'm they're not doing anything shady, Edwin. But then because it's been a while since I watched episode 6 at the time you're recording this. So I actually forgot. I was because I had to remind myself, it's right, Isaac and him had that whole loan scam. They made it seem like the church was taking out that $100,000 loan and they pocketed the money. So Edwin knows what's what, but Danny's trying to pretend no, it's on the up and up, because it also allows him to rub Edwin's face in it, because you're oh, here you are trying to make it seem, I don't know if he was legitimately asking because he was legitimately asking, or could it be he wanted to use it as an opportunity to get involved with whatever it is that Danny's involved in, and then blow up his whole spot by being yeah, he's a fraud, he's a fake, so he can kind of get back on top. And I think that speaks volumes that Edwin hasn't really been himself since, I think we saw cracks in it already, but I don't know whether his wife is constantly talking about Danny, and maybe that was already an issue and now it's gotten even worse since Danny kind of took over Prey's team. He killed it at the beginning with the Amazing Grace and everything, right? So I wonder if just how Edwin rubs Danny the wrong way, Danny rubs Edwin the wrong way as well. So like I said, I don't know if that was just a way to kind of, because that is so important to him. I think Danny and Edwin kind of have that same thing where it's Edwin needs to hold on to that position because it fulfills him in some regards. So I think he kind of feels empty without it. So he needs that to kind of fill the void inside of himself. So you take all of that, then we switch gears a little bit and shift over to Amy's circumstances where life is good, sold the business and everything. Everything's Gucci, everything's culture on that side of things. I even love that she kind of felt bad the moment she felt like her nanny was doing too much. She feels like I'm not doing enough because it's like, right, the whole point was like to get a full-time nanny so you could relax. I mean, this is all the work you put in is now bearing fruit. But Amy kind of feels like she's probably not fulfilling like in some shape or form, she feels like, oh, I'm kind of like not doing enough. Like, maybe we shouldn't have to like force Betty to kind of work here all the time. But George is like, no, like that's what she's a full-time nanny. That's kind of the whole gig, you know? And, yeah, they're in a really good spot. And after they were in the middle of them having sex, I love the whole metaphors of like, oh yeah, like a soggy straw is still inside of a smoothie even when it's soggy. That was a whole interesting metaphor. But George opened up about the whole Mia thing, which emotional cheating is still cheating regardless. Because what is cheating all about? Cheating is about typically you're getting something from someone else that you're not getting from your partner. And so for him, it's like at the time Amy was kind of closed off and he wasn't emotionally connecting with her. And Amy was getting pissed, but I'm like, yo, you kind of don't have a leg to stand on this regard because, you know, you can't compare. Cheating is cheating regardless. They both kind of screwed up, but it is even more effed up. The fact is like, well, you emotionally and physically cheated with Paul. And you could tell that was wearing on her because she recognized like how messed up it was because he's up here asking for her forgiveness and he's sorry. And he's like, after the business, you know, before your deal with the business closed, like you were emotionally cut off, but you're, you know, and I love you and I want to make this work. So like we should go see Dr. Lynn. And Amy wanted to talk to her one-on-one. I thought she was going to open up to Dr. Lynn about the affair, but she didn't. Well, about what George did, but it was also because she felt guilty because it's like, yeah, George did this thing, but it's also on me. And she recognizes that, but she's also not telling George about her affair because once again, hers went a step further. He never slept with Mia. Yes, he jerked off to her pictures and said, I love you. So it was an emotional affair. So yes, he still cheated, but she also went a step further because she actually had sex with Paul. So, and that guilt was kind of like building up inside of her. And like she had that interesting conversation about like, do you think love is really unconditional? That like if you were to kind of tell someone like a big mistake, could they still love you or will it kind of be destroyed? Like, is there any real thing of unconditional love? And then the doctor referenced like, oh, what is this kind of a reference to your parents? But she's like, no. My parents love me unconditionally. Like they sacrificed so much for me. But then Dr. Lynn was like, but did that ever come with its own conditions? And Amy immediately switched over to be like, no. I'm talking about like George and the Mia thing. Now, I don't know whether she was like, no. Like this, I mean, yes, we know it was about her and the whole Paul thing, really, and you know how it makes her feel so guilty about the George thing because she's afraid if she tells him, especially now that she didn't tell him up front. I mean, even she had told him up front, like, once again, cheating's that complicated thing of like, oh, she wants to move past it because that's by moving past his affair because the more he talks about it, the guiltier she feels about her own circumstances, her own affair. But I don't know if there's still validity to some of like the parental, like the stuff about her own parents that Dr. Lynn was kind of getting into. I wonder is there some truth to that? Because like, I mean, it does stem from somewhere because for her, Amy talks about like the reason why she was never willing to reproduce is because she was so afraid of passing on her negative qualities. I 100% get that. That's one of my biggest fears of like, I have too much bullshit. I have too much baggage. I have too many issues to like raise a child, you know? It's like, yeah, like I'm there for my nieces and nephews sometimes in some capacities, but not in the same capacity like a parent would be, you know? And so that's just like, that's why I am ever scared to have kids. So I completely resonate with that. I'm like, I don't want to pass on my bad BS to my kid. And for her, that's why she was like, I remember the first year me and George were dating. It was so great. And it's like, I found someone who it felt like they like completed me, like kind of made up for what I was missing. I found in this other person. And she's like, all the good that George was and all the salvageable parts of me. And we made something beautiful and perfect. Our daughter, June, you know? And she didn't want to lose all that. So, George is having a party because he had talked to Danny because they reconnected. I guess they hadn't seen each other in a hot minute. I don't know if it was the last time we saw them hanging out in the show was the last time, or maybe they met up sometime then and there in between, but in that 8-month period, but they hadn't hung out in a while. And once again, Danny opened up about that stuff, and I thought that was so interesting where he's like, yeah, I'm doing all this stuff, praise team, all this stuff, business is doing good, but for him, it's like, it's that emptiness, it's that void of like, it doesn't feel like, I don't know, like it didn't feel what he thought it was, because, heavy wears the crown. He's like, yeah, but basically it feels the same. I thought like, like he thought for so long, the hustle and bustle, like him hustling to try and make it through life. He thought like, all right, I hustled and it kind of meant nothing. But now that I'm in a place where I'm good, he thought like, oh, I'll be good. But for him, it's like the crown feels exactly the same. I didn't change. And that in itself is the thing. Like the feeling stayed the same because Danny's not tackling what's at the heart of all this. And the same thing in Amy's regard. Neither one of them is tackling the root of these deeper issues. Everything else is a symptom of this bigger issue that you're not tackling, And so George was like, oh, you should talk to my wife. She's going through depression. And he's like, she's battled with it. And it's like, it's like I'm a strong person, but she's able to kind of keep things even stronger. So at the party where she's being praised as the muse of George's, which he even made this remark about how like, oh, his old work was shit. Even though Danny praised it. I'm curious, is that because and Danny was like, oh, is that the case? Like, I don't know if like there was almost a connection where it's like the past kind of rubs Danny the wrong way for his own life, and maybe the same thing for George, because maybe it's a reminder to maybe Mia was kind of some of the inspiration for that, or maybe that was just like the guilt about I don't know. Maybe a lot of that was compounded in George in that moment when he said that, because it was like when he was like, oh yeah, my art was shit or whatever, like he was so dismissive of it, like the past work. I guess it's like, right, this work is now made from love between me and my wife who's so willing to forgive me for the affair situation. So maybe that was all kind of rattling off in his mind at the time. But either way, moving past that, Amy and Danny talk, and she's like, what are you doing here? Obviously, he's pretending to be Zane. And I love him being like, oh, where's your bathroom? And she's like, no, I'll show him where to go, because he might miss it. And it's like, I love that. But it's like, no, I didn't come here to start anything. I just want to know, like, does it feel any different? Like, if I work hard to get to where you are, will it be any different? And for her, it's like, no, everything fades. No matter what you do, like that feeling, like it never lasts forever. You're always going to be searching to try and reclaim that feeling, but you never will. It's almost like getting high. It's like, what are you doing? You're chasing that first high and you'll never get there again. So it's kind of applicable in this regard. And so she's just asking Danny to leave. And he legitimately came there to squash the beef, but also to be like, hey, I legitimately hope that you would have answers, because once again, regardless of their BS, there's so many similarities between these characters, and they're more alike than they are different, but they're so caught up in, the situations that have led them here that they've never recognized that, and it's not till like Amy was bending over that it finally clicked in Danny's head, and he went back to the picture he took off of Paula's phone and realizes Kayla is Amy. And he said Kayla, and Amy turned around, and he's like pissed at her. I was like, oh, you took advantage of a child. And they're both throwing like things back and forth to each other. It's like, right. She's like, I know about your cousin's situation. You let him take the fall for it, and your life's been good since. Don't screw with me. I will burn your life. It's like, you had an affair with Paul. You took advantage of a child. It's like, your brother isn't a child. He can't grow and be a better person because you won't allow him to be. And I think there's something deeper there where it's like Danny has to feel superior than his brother. He always, since the beginning, when his brother had like the crypto thing, which is, I'm like, I get it, but he's like, I'm the older one. I know what's what. I know what's best for everybody. So it's like, you've kind of always been a dictator to your brother. You feel the need to kind of put him in this place, whether you realize it consciously or subconsciously. That's kind of what's happening there. So there's a little bit of like Amy being like, you're not allowing your brother to grow. You're keeping him pigeonholed just so you can kind of lord that over him and be, having your little brother outclass you is not something you can really deal with. So obviously, once again, they're flinging shit at each other about all of this. So, and what does Danny do when he gets back home? He ends up telling Paul who Kayla really is, that she's Amy, which, yes, she initially got close to him. It initially wasn't even about Initially she got close to him yes, but that was up to an extent. Eventually she started hanging out with him emotionally and connecting with him, and all that had nothing to do with Danny. The emotions, the sex, that's just because she was feeling him. She was falling for him because she was filling some void she had in her own relationship, just like, George was doing. But the problem is Danny went even further by telling his brother this, because he's like, oh, you didn't really care about her, right? And Paul's like, no, I don't give a shit. It's like, no, he does. If he had realized what his brother was saying when he was hanging out with Bobby and Michael, being like, oh yeah, like that, you guys will know when you find that connection, but he was so caught up in his work, he never paid attention. Like, this wasn't just, it's 8 months later, and he's still talking about Amy. Once again, I get it, and I've had hard times letting go of exes. Like, some of those connections, like, when that shit hits hard, it hits hard, and it's hard to, like, really, like, fully let that go. So I get that, but it's like Danny's so caught up in his own shit that he never realized what Paul was kind of going through when it came to that whole Kayla thing. And he didn't realize like how much damage he'd be causing by like opening up that can of worms, and even taking her words by being like, yeah, she called you an effing child or whatever. And it's like, well, Danny's saying all this because he wants his brother to cut ties with, like, forget her, she's not worth it. You're so sprung on a woman that's not worth it. You were in love with, well, you cared about a woman that wasn't worth it. She's a terrible human being. She's messed up. Once again, yes, it started with, there is, like I said, it's not like, it's not all, like, there is truth in, yes, she initially got close to him for the purpose of coming after Danny, but it became something else later on, but Danny doesn't know that. He wouldn't bother. For him, it's like, it will always be tainted because I know you had bad intentions from the beginning. Whatever it became afterwards doesn't matter. He doesn't even want to believe that it became anything afterwards because he wouldn't ever give Amy a chance to explain it. Didn't really kind of spend enough time with his brother to really know how he felt about all of this. But also saying like, right, she called you a child. It's like, that's not the case. She's saying that you are treating him and kind of boxing him in like a child instead of letting him grow and be, because she was able to talk to Danny just like you kind of were able to kind of talk to George a little bit. Because Danny said like, oh, I don't have anyone I can talk to about this stuff. Paul didn't either. And he talked to Amy about it. They were able to open up with each other. So that's kind of the sad thing of it all, that it, and once again, Danny probably didn't think twice about how much spice he was adding to it when he said what he said, which while that's all happening, Amy and George are talking, and she's like, I forgive you. Let's move away. Let's kind of forget about this. For one, she wants to stay as far away from Danny. I don't want to, he knows where I live and he can show up at any point in time. Plus, I never want to talk about this again. Don't worry about your affair situation. I forgive you. We can move away. We can start fresh but that's always the thing. No matter where you go, you're always going to be bringing you with you. So she thinks like if she can move away, she can get away from all this. It's like, no, that guilt and everything is going to come with you. But you think if you can just bury it deep enough, it will never resurface. So that happened. She went to go shop or something. And then the next day, George shows up and he ends up talking to George. Paul ends up showing up and he talks to George and tells him, Amy's watching this on like a Ring camera or something, like the camera of their house. She gets back there. George is left with June and won't answer the phone now. Once again, it's not only that she had an affair, she actually went through with it all the way. She also didn't ever admit it. So he made him feel even worse about it. And now it's like, oh, that's why you were so forgiving, because you were covering up for your own BS. And it's like, once again, I cheated him, but you went a step further with your cheating. So your cheating is still worse than mine. Danny also, it doesn't have the fulfillment he thought he would, because he's there with his parents. They're congratulating him and hugging him and everything. But you can see this look almost like it wasn't enough. It's not the satisfactory thing he thought it would be. So Amy's life has gotten blown up. Danny ends up taking his parents to the house, and it's burned to the ground. That's also part of like the insurance. Like, who knows how that's going to blow back on him because of the whole loan scam him and Isaac had set up. And it's all in that matter of moments, their decisions not to kind of let go and just letting their anger get the best of them, saying stuff they shouldn't have. Like, Danny should have never gone there in the first place. Their lives probably would have fallen apart in some shape or form anyway, because it never would have gone away, but they imploded each other's life. I even thought was beautiful the ending where Amy is at a Burger King eating like that chicken sandwich, which, I was like, oh, she knows about it. At first I was like, oh, that's poetic, she's doing that. But I was like, no, Paul told her about that, because she said like he told her about Danny driving out of his way to do that and eat those by himself. So, and that aspect of them like both seeing like it, like we get like this like few shots of like a dirt ground, and it's kind of symbolizing, I guess it's almost like, I don't know if it's supposed to be a symbolization of like when you dig someone's grave, you got to be digging your own when it comes to revenge, or what, like, but it's a deep symbolism of like, I guess the void they're feeling inside of themselves, as well as like just the anger they're going through. Like there's a lot that could represent, and I guess going forward we might see things even more because things have escalated. They've kind of imploded each other's lives. Exploded rather, you know, and their lives have been exploded, and they themselves are imploding, and they're going, you know, Amy made her move. It's like, it's extreme, but it's like, yeah, you destroyed my home, I'm literally going to destroy yours. Also, side note, I completely forgot to talk about this at Amy's party. Jordan and her sister-in-law are together now. It's like, the moment they start talking, I was like, wait, are you together? And then they talked about, I was like, that's wild. It's like, yeah. She's like, yeah, my brother's super pissed. It's like, that's so interesting how that worked out. I mean, it works out for her sister-in-law because her now fiance. Oh, that's wild. Like, I mean, that pops up in shows from time to time where it's like, oh, this person was together, but you never see early days of it enough. I mean, we never really got to spend time with her, like Jordan's brother, anyway. So it's not like we really knew him, but it's funny how that worked out because her sister-in-law was always about her. It's her sister's name. It's Naomi, right? Yeah, like Naomi was always. If I could be saying the wrong name. I want to say it's Naomi. Once again, it's been a while between episodes for me. But she was always kind of like all about Jordan anyway. It almost felt like Jordan's brother was a means to an end just to be close to Jordan. But now it's like, oh, you're together now, and maybe you're happier. Because I think Naomi was definitely filling some voids in her own life, and maybe she's in a better place being with Jordan. I don't know. Not like Jordan seemed like she's 100% the greatest person, but we'll see. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.